Before we proceed with this narrative, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing to our YouTube channel. In the comments section, we invite you to share your viewing location. The day began as any other, yet my nephew surprised me. I felt invigorated and confident that the day would proceed smoothly. I proceeded to the kitchen to prepare breakfast, determined to make a delicious meal. Before we proceed with the narrative, please consider subscribing to our YouTube channel, liking our content, and sharing it with others. The day began as any other, yet my nephew had a surprise in store for me. I felt great, as if everything would go smoothly. I proceeded to the kitchen to prepare breakfast, deciding to make pancakes, my nephew's favorite. While mixing the batter, I could hear birds singing and cars passing by outside. It was a peaceful yet delicious moment. The griddle, my nephew's beaming face, appeared at the door. I inquired about his breakfast selection, and his face brightened with excitement when I told him we were having pancakes. We shared a laugh and enjoyed the aroma as I cooked the first stack. My nephew, who has a particular affinity for pancakes, arrived with a sense of anticipation. As I proceeded to mix the batter, the sounds of birdsong and traffic from outside created a serene atmosphere. The griddle, my nephew's vibrant store, made an entrance, his expression radiating enthusiasm. I inquired about his breakfast plans, and he responded with a broad smile, revealing our plan to indulge in pancakes. We shared a moment of levity as I prepared the first batch. Subsequently, he proposed a departure for an adventure, a notion that caught me somewhat off guard. While we frequently embarked on modest outings, this one felt distinctive. He suggested exploring the neighboring park and seeking out hidden treasures. I found the concept appealing, and we set out after breakfast. The sun, now at its zenith, imbued the park with a lively energy as we traversed the grounds. Uncovering, he abruptly announced, "Let's embark on an adventure today." I raised an eyebrow, contemplating the nature of his proposal. While we frequently engaged in brief outings, this one felt distinctive. He proposed exploring the nearby park and searching for hidden treasures. I was enthusiastic about the idea, and we set out after breakfast. The sun was particularly bright, invigorating us as we walked through the park, encountering interesting rocks, flowers, and insects. I was amazed at how an ordinary morning transformed into an unforgettable adventure due to my nephew's enthusiasm. By the time we returned home, I was tired but satisfied. As I gathered the ingredients, I could almost smell the fresh air entering through the window. I knew today was going to be exceptional, since I had not only prepared pancakes and provided my nephew with a memorable experience. The first thing I did was cook eggs and bacon, which I knew would taste delicious. As soon as I heard the bacon sizzle as I prepared breakfast, I reflected on the value of a peaceful morning before the day's activities began. Just as I was ready to finish cooking, I remembered. I realized that I had forgotten to buy savory sausages. I was taken aback by this lapse, as I knew how much my nephew enjoyed hot dogs during breakfast. It was as if he couldn't enjoy a meal without them. I was anxious, picturing his delight at seeing them on the table. My nephew had a unique affinity for hot dogs. He had a particular affinity for hot dogs, regardless of what else might be on his plate. I was determined not to disappoint him, so I hastily prepared them before he woke up. I was slightly anxious as I did so, and I muttered under my breath when I realized that Stefan and I were searching the kitchen in a hurried search for them before my nephew's arrival. Breakfast. I was about to give up when I heard a soothing voice behind me ask, "What's the matter? Are you all upset?" I was taken aback for a moment, but then I realized it was Stefan, not my mom, standing there. I didn't want to disappoint him because hot dogs are his favorite breakfast. I nearly forgot to make his favorite hot dogs because his grin was so laid he appeared confused, as if he was wondering why I was so anxious. I froze, embarrassed. "Please don't be furious, Stefan." "I apologize," I said, my voice faltering. I felt a pang of shame wash over me. I knew he would be disappointed, but I had to own up to my mistake. That morning was so unusual because it was the first time I had ever seen Stefan smiling. Usually, my nephew had a serious expression and rarely spoke to anyone except me. His smile caught me off guard, He inquired about my well-being, and I felt a sense of unease. I apologized, expressing my concern that he might be displeased. I acknowledged the unusual nature of the situation, as it was the first time I had ever seen Stefan smiling. Usually, my nephew maintained a serious demeanor and rarely engaged in conversation with anyone except me. His smile caught me off guard, making the moment feel unusual, yet also somewhat pleasant. It was as if I were witnessing a completely different side of him, one I hadn't anticipated. "Are you sure you're okay without hot dogs?" I inquired, wanting to ensure he was comfortable with the decision before I asked, "Do you like hot dogs?" Stefan usually made it clear when something wasn't to his liking, but I was still concerned I might have disappointed him. Stefan replied in a calm voice, "You forgot to make them," his tone filled with curiosity. The moment felt unusual, but it was also kind of pleasant. It was as if I were witnessing a completely different side of him, one I hadn't anticipated. "Are you sure you're okay without hot dogs?" I asked, wanting to make sure he was fine with it before I inquired about his preferences. Stefan usually made it clear when something wasn't to his liking, but I was still worried I'd let him down. Stefan said in a calm voice, "You forgot to make them." His tone was filled with curiosity. As he drew near, meeting my intense gaze, I felt a surge of unease, unsure of how to respond. "Hey, hot dogs are great for breakfast," I replied, my heart racing for reasons I couldn't quite put my finger on. Was it Stefan's behavior or the overall strangeness of the situation? Something was off. I sensed a change in the air, and I wanted to give it a try. "There's this hot dog I want you to try," Stefan said, gesturing toward his package. As he approached, I met his gaze, and I felt a sense of unease. I responded, "Hey, hot dogs are a great breakfast option." My heart was racing, and I couldn't pinpoint the reason. Something felt off, and I wanted to address it. "There's a hot dog I want you to try," Stefan said, gesturing towards his package. "If you're still watching this video and finding the story inspiring, please leave a comment to let me know." I was taken aback by his words, which sounded strange, and his actions, which were slightly off. "Unfortunately, we don't have any hot dogs in stock." I was scared and had forgotten to pick any up at the market, so I spoke rapidly, almost tripping over my words when I explained. However, he didn't seem to mind that there weren't. Despite his reassurances, I was concerned about the situation. His fidgeting with his package was disconcerting, and I found myself at a loss for words. I attempted to change the subject by suggesting a different breakfast item. I was perplexed by his behavior, which left me. I inquired about the availability of a different breakfast item to change the subject, as I was both perplexed and anxious. Stefan stared at me, his grip on the package unaltered. "It's not about the food," he whispered, but there was an undeniable air of unease in the room. I was at a loss as to how to proceed. I wanted things to return to normal, but it seemed like that was becoming more elusive. Dean mentioned that the object in his pants was growing larger. Suddenly, I felt like I couldn't breathe. I was taken aback by the peculiar behavior of Stefan and his companion. Stefan, who was gripping a package tightly, said, "I'm going to let you taste this hot." There was an undeniable air of unease in the room, and I felt a sense of uncertainty regarding how to proceed. I was eager for the situation to return to normal, but it seemed increasingly elusive. Dean mentioned that the object in Stefan's pants was growing larger. Suddenly, I felt like I couldn't breathe, and my heart was racing. I stood there, transfixed, trying to make sense of the situation. My mind raced with confusion, and the air felt heavy. I kept telling myself that this wasn't real, but the more I looked, the more I realized that something was wrong. The object in Stefan's pants was already wet, and I attempted to step back, but my legs felt weak, as if they didn't want to move. I was racing, and I was at a loss as to how to proceed due to the unusual nature of the situation. I stood there, transfixed, attempting to comprehend the circumstances. My mind was inundated with confusion, and the air felt heavy. I repeatedly told myself that this wasn't real, but the more I observed, the more I realized that something was amiss. The object in his pants was already wet, and I attempted to step back, but my legs felt weak, as if they didn't want to move. I stared at Stefan with the same peculiar expression on his face. I was at a loss for words and unsure of how to respond. The atmosphere in the room was becoming more surreal, and I wanted to say something, but my throat felt constricted, and nothing came out. I was taken aback by what Stefan was doing, but I remained silent as I tried to make sense of it all. Then, with an air of seriousness, he said, "I'm going to let you taste this hot." I stared at Stefan, my face a picture of bewilderment. I was at a loss for words, unsure how to respond. The room was becoming more surreal, and I wanted to say something, but my throat felt tight, and no words came out. I was taken aback by what Stefan was doing, but I remained silent, trying to make sense of it. Then, with a serious expression, he said, "I'm going to let you taste this." I waited a moment before speaking, but I'm glad I did. I remained still, my pulse racing, and my confusion deepening, expecting his words to eventually make sense. Suddenly, however, his penis slithered between my legs and vanished as swiftly as it had come. "Dear Stefan," I eventually spoke, "I still don't understand your motivations or why you thought that was okay. Something wasn't right, and I wanted to put a stop to it before I paused briefly before speaking, but I am pleased that I did so." I remained still, my pulse racing and my confusion deepening, anticipating that his words would eventually make sense. Suddenly, however, his penis slithered between my buttocks and vanished as swiftly as it had come. "Dear Stefan," I eventually spoke out, "but I still don't understand his motivations or why he believed that was okay. Something wasn't right, and I wanted to put a stop to it before things got worse." Stefan continued to move his penis through my buttocks as if nothing was wrong, pretending not to notice or care that anything was amiss. I stood there, confused, as if I was in a dream. I yelled out to him again, hoping he would listen this time, but he persisted. Now, I was stuck, not knowing what to do. "Just relax," he said calmly, as if nothing was wrong, and I couldn't help but close my eyes in pleasure. Suddenly, he pulled his penis out. The situation deteriorated further. Stefan continued to manipulate his penis through my anus as if nothing was amiss, feigning indifference to the fact that I was not performing as desired. I stood there, perplexed, as if I were in a dream. I called out to him, hoping he would pay attention this time, but he persisted. I was at a loss as to how to respond. "Relax," he said calmly, as if nothing was wrong, and I closed my eyes in pleasure. Suddenly, he moistened his hands with his saliva. I was at a loss as to why he did this, but I remained silent and did nothing. My thoughts raced as I attempted to understand what was happening, but I was unable to do either. Stefan repeated his statement, his voice resonating throughout the room. I felt a mix of unease and curiosity as I felt his wet hands run over my anus. I wasn't sure if I should continue or not, but before I could speak, he moistened his hands with his saliva, and I was at a loss as to why. I remained silent, unable to formulate a response. My thoughts raced as I attempted to discern the reason for his actions, but I was unable to do so. Stefan repeated himself, his voice resonating throughout the room. I felt a mixture of unease and curiosity as his wet hands ran over my dumplings. I wasn't sure whether I should continue or not, but before I could speak, something happened. My voice echoed throughout the room, and I couldn't control my outburst. My mind kept telling me to stop, to say something to make Stefan leave the room, but I couldn't make up my mind. I stood there, frozen, torn between wanting to end it and being curious about what would happen next. Unfortunately, my negative thoughts took over my mind. I noticed that he was beginning to slow down, which made me angry. I yelled, "Please don't slow down." My voice resonated throughout the room, and I found myself unable to contain my emotions. My rational mind urged me to interject, to express my desire for him to excuse himself, but I hesitated. I stood there, immobilized, torn between the desire to end the situation and the curiosity about what would ensue. Unfortunately, my negative thoughts took hold. I noticed that he was beginning to slow down, which provoked my anger. I yelled, "Please, don't slow down. I love it." As I spoke, I became aware of the surprise on Stefan's face. It was as if he didn't expect my reaction. I could tell that my feelings were perplexing to him, but I paid it little heed. All I wanted was for him to continue and experience the mounting excitement within me. A wave of shame washed over me, and I was reluctant to acknowledge it. I was overwhelmed by a tumultuous melange of emotions. I felt a surge of adrenaline course through my veins, making it challenging to grasp the depth of my emotions. Stefan appeared to pause for a moment, then smiled, indicating that my remarks had bolstered his confidence, Notwithstanding my humiliation, I was still desirous of more, and he commenced movement once more, engendering a wave of elation. I was engrossed in this peculiar sensation, and it was gratifying to be able to articulate my desires, put aside the shame, and focus on the present moment. I need to live in the moment. I realize that feelings can be confusing, especially when you don't know what to expect next. As we continued, I found myself enjoying the experience even more. All those worries and shame began to fade away, replaced by a sense of freedom. I let myself sink into the moment, allowing the happiness to take over. It was as if everything else had disappeared, and all that mattered was what was happening right. I'm focusing on the present. I recognize that emotions can be perplexing, particularly when there's uncertainty about what lies ahead. However, as the situation unfolded, I found myself increasingly relishing the experience. All previous concerns and feelings of guilt gradually dissipated, replaced by a profound sense of liberty. I permitted myself to fully immerse in the moment, allowing the joy to envelop me. It was as if all other concerns ceased to exist, and the present moment became my sole focus. I felt an immense weight lift from my shoulders, as if a substantial burden had been removed. For the first time, I could completely relish the moment without any thoughts hindering me. "You appeared to be equally delighted," Stefan remarked with a broad smile that heightened the intensity of the moment. His voice had a way of making the moment feel exciting, and I couldn't help but feel a rush of warmth inside. "Can I show you a greater experience than this?" he asked, full of curiosity. Without waiting for an answer, he picked me up and carried me to the bedroom. He lifted me in his arms and carefully let his package slide through my buns. It was like he was offering a unique adventure, and I was completely immersed in the excitement. I could see how much he wanted to make me feel loved, and it was incredible. I felt alive, and in that moment, I felt happy to be cared for. I could picture myself smiling, feeling warm and safe in Stefan's arms, even though I wasn't moving much. He was providing me with a unique experience, and I was intrigued by the sensation of being held. I could perceive how dedicated he was to making me feel cherished, and it was remarkable. I felt revitalized, and in that instant, I felt content to be cared for. I could envision myself smiling, feeling warm and secure in Stefan's embrace, despite the fact that I was not moving significantly. It felt as though I was levitating. I was part of something extraordinary. There was a certain enchantment to how Stefan was treating me, making me feel significant. I was enjoying myself so much at that moment that I didn't want it to end. It felt invigorating and novel, and I wished we could continue forever. I was so immersed in the pleasure that I was completely immersed in the experience, and I was intrigued by the sense of magic that Stefan's treatment of me invoked. I was having such a positive and enjoyable experience that I didn't want it to end. I felt a sense of excitement and novelty, and I wished that we could continue for an indefinite period. I was so immersed in the enjoyment of the experience that I didn't consider the time. I just wanted him to continue. So, when he suddenly stopped, I felt a wave of disappointment wash over me. I was curious about his pause and hoped he would resume soon. Just when I believed the time had passed, he made an announcement that attracted my attention. I was bewildered and didn't understand what he meant. I would like to know if you are still watching this video and find the story inspiring. Please leave a comment to let me know. I began to feel intrigued. I wonder what he was talking about. Was it something else? I leaned in closer, eager to hear what he was going to say next. My mind was swirling with questions. I was intrigued by the concept of the hot dog, and I wanted to understand the significance of its inclusion. I blinked in surprise, trying to comprehend the message. It was an unconventional concept, yet his words piqued my curiosity. My imagination was sparked. He then stated, "This is the hot dog I want you to taste. This is the hot dog I was talking about." I blinked in surprise, attempting to comprehend his words. The concept was peculiar, yet there was something about it that piqued my curiosity. My imagination began to run wild, and I could almost picture what he meant. Perhaps this was all part of a playful game, something that would enhance the excitement of our time together. I was completely captivated. I was taken aback when I saw Stefan act so swiftly. He suddenly grabbed his reddish package and pushed it right into my mouth. I watched in disbelief as the object in question was of considerable size, to the point that it almost ruptured my oral cavity. It appeared to be alive, writhing and turning as if it wanted to break free. My heart rate accelerated as I recognized the situation was becoming more and more intense. I was so taken aback by what was happening right in front of me that I was at a loss for words. The object in question continued to the package was so large that it almost ruptured my mouth. It appeared to be alive, writhing and throbbing, as if attempting to break free. My heart raced as I realized the situation was intensifying. I was so surprised by what was happening right in front of me that I didn't know how to respond. The package continued to writhing and throbbing, and I felt a mix of fear and curiosity. It looked so powerful, almost like it was trying to escape and cause destruction. I held my breath, anticipating the possibility of my jaw snapping back into place. Seeing Stefan's package fumble made me anxious, but I also felt a twinge of excitement. I had never seen anything like it. I was experiencing a range of emotions, from fear to curiosity. The sensation was powerful, as if it were trying to escape and cause destruction. I held my breath, anticipating the moment my jaw would snap back into place. Seeing Stefan's arousal made me anxious, but I also felt a surge of excitement. I had never seen anything like it. Stefan's eyes were tightly shut as he jumped with delight, shouting, "It's here! It's here!" It was as if he were anticipating a surprise. My heart began to race as I wondered what would happen next. His behavior piqued my curiosity and a bit of anxiety. I could tell that I was intrigued by Stefan's excitement, which manifested in the form of a pounding in his pants. This was followed by the emergence of a viscous liquid, which cascaded downwards, creating small puddles on the ground. The liquid, which I had never tasted before, was sweet and had a unique consistency. I was intrigued by the novelty of the experience, and my interest in the subject persisted as we collaborated to address the situation. I found myself overcome with a sense of astonishment as I surveyed the aftermath of our activities. Upon concluding the task, Stefan's presence was noted. He appeared remarkably relieved, as if a substantial weight had been lifted from his shoulders. As I continued to process the events that had transpired, he promptly assisted me in cleaning up the mess he had created. As we collaborated to wipe away the spilled venom, I experienced a range of emotions, including surprise after we dried ourselves. Stefan drew nearer to me, his grin was wide, and happiness washed over him, along with some perplexity about what we had just accomplished. In an attempt to comprehend his words, I blinked. Part of me wanted to laugh at his intense devotion to hot dogs, but after our adventure, I felt a strange connection to him as he left. Stefan stood closer to me, his smile wide, and a sense of contentment mixed with a hint of confusion about what we had just achieved. In an effort to understand his words, I blinked, and part of me felt a desire to laugh at his unwavering passion for hot dogs. However, after our encounter, I felt a peculiar connection to him as he departed. I stood in the kitchen, slightly disoriented, realizing that I had neglected to eat breakfast. What had started as a typical morning had evolved into something out of the ordinary and invigorating. Despite this, I was certain that I had experienced something extraordinary with my nephew. I smiled, reflecting on the enjoyable time we had, and eagerly looking forward to what lay ahead.